He thought it was just another night on call, until his ex walked into the ER with 3 babies in her arms, and he realized the truth he'd been avoiding for years had finally caught up to him. If you love stories like this, make sure to subscribe to our channel. We post new videos every day. Now back to the story. Through the last window of the interstate bus, she watched the dirt road get narrower as they climbed into the mountains. Her hands trembled in her lap, not from the chill of the June morning in the Appalachians, but from the certainty that she would never go home again, if you could even call that place home. Abigail Miller, Abby as everyone knew her, carried a lie in her body that had lasted 22 years. Her left leg, the one she'd limped on since she was a child, had nothing wrong with it. She had been trained by her parents to fake it day after day, to pretend she couldn't properly support her own weight. "Broken women ain't no use to them," her father would repeat, whenever she questioned why she had to keep up the painful charade. Them were the powerful men of the region, ranchers with thousands of acres, corrupt politicians, businessmen who stepped out of their imported pickup trucks in downtown Clearwater Creek, always looking for a good time. And a good time, in that god-forsaken corner of the world, meant young pretty girls for their sordid whims. Abby grew up watching friends from school disappear after being chosen to work on the ranches, or worse, to accompany the powerful men on their trips to the state capital. They always came back different, when they came back at all. The bus stopped at the end of the paved, a road, where a steep gravel path began its ascent. This was the way to St. Benedict Ranch, a property no one in the area knew much about, but about which everyone whispered conflicting stories. They said the owner was a dangerous man, a rich outsider who had bought up thousands of acres in the mountains and lived isolated like a hermit, only receiving supply deliveries and never coming down to town to mix with normal people. Some said he was a foreigner, maybe Middle Eastern or European. Others that he was on the run from the law, hiding an illicit fortune. All Abby knew was that she was being taken there like a piece of merchandise. 2 weeks earlier, on a suffocating May afternoon, Colonel Josiah Kane had shown up at her father's general store. A man of 60, with a prominent belly and small eyes that always seemed to be calculating the value of things and people, Josiah was the one who really ran Clearwater Creek and the 3 neighboring counties. The mayor was his political godson, the sheriff his brother-in-law, and half the productive land in the region was in his name at the county records office. His word was law, and his law was fear. On that sweltering afternoon, he had been drinking whiskey with her father at the greasy counter of the store, talking about the spreading drought, the upcoming local elections, about the hard times that demanded sacrifices from everyone. Until his predatory gaze landed on Abby, who was stocking cans of sardines on a dusty shelf, trying to make herself invisible. "That your girl, Anthony?" "Yes, sir, Colonel, that's Abby, but she's... well, you can see, can't you? Born with a bad leg. Poor thing, she'll never get married." Josiah studied her from head to toe with those cold eyes, and Abby felt her skin crawl as if 1,000 ants were marching over her. Instinctively, she exaggerated her limp, faking extreme difficulty balancing as she carried a light box of cleaning supplies. "Real shame," the colonel muttered, running his tongue over his chapped lips. "She's got some pretty features, the girl. But yeah, a broken woman ain't good for much in this life." She almost sighed in relief. Once again, the lie she had carried since she was 5 had protected her from interested gazes. Once again, the faked disability had worked as a shield against predators. But the feeling of safety lasted only a few seconds. "Speaking of which, Anthony," Josiah continued, refilling his glass of whiskey, "I've got some important business to settle. That weird outsider up in the mountains, the one they call Santiago. He's been buying supplies in the area, always pays cash, but he always sends his ranch hands to pick things up. Never comes down to talk to civilized folk, you know how it is." "What about him, Colonel?" "I have $1 million partnership proposal for him. I want him to invest in a cattle operation I'm setting up in the north of the state. Big-time stuff, gonna make money for everyone. But the man won't see me. I've sent word 3 times, and he always makes up some excuse." Josiah spat on the dirt floor. "These rich city slickers think they're better than us country folk. And what do you want me to do about it? I want you to go up there and deliver a letter to him, in person, man to man, and while you're at it, the Colonel's eyes returned to Abby with a glint she didn't like. Take this girl with you. I heard the man's been living alone for years, isolated like a wild animal. He must be in need of some female company, even if she's, well, defective. Abby felt the world spin around her. The air seemed to thin, and she had to lean against the shelf to keep from actually fainting. Her father lowered his head, avoiding her gaze, and Abby realized with growing horror that he was actually considering the monstrous proposal. "Colonel, she's my only daughter. And that's exactly why you should want what's best for her." Josiah's voice took on a threatening tone. "Up there, she'll at least have a solid roof over her head and food on the table every day. Here, with that bad leg and no dowry, who the hell is going to marry her? She'll become dead weight for you, Anthony, a burden that's only going to grow with time." The words were like slaps to the face. Abby knew her father had never truly loved her. She was just another mouth to feed, a constant reminder that he hadn't managed to produce the son he so desperately wanted to help in the store and carry on the family name. But to hear him silently agree with the Colonel, to seriously consider handing her over like an object to a stranger, was a pain she hadn't expected and wasn't prepared to feel. "If the man takes her," Josiah continued, savoring his anticipated victory, "consider your loan debt completely forgiven. That's $8,000 you won't have to pay me. And if he agrees to the cattle partnership, there's a fat commission in it for you. Everybody wins." $8,000. The exact amount her father owed the Colonel since the corn crop was lost to blight the previous year. Abby was worth $8,000 in the perverse accounting of these men. That was her price on the human market that operated in the shadows of Clearwater Creek. That night, after the Colonel left, leaving a trail of veiled threats and false promises, Abby tried to talk to her mother. Antonia was a 52-year-old woman, prematurely aged by hard work and a tough life, who spent her days sewing clothes for others and praying the rosary in a desperate attempt to find some meaning in the cruel existence that had been forced upon her. "Mom, are you going to let him give me to that stranger in the mountains?" Antonia didn't look up from the embroidery she was working on by the dim light of a kerosene lamp. "Your fate is already sealed, child. If it's not the man up there, it'll be someone around here. At least there you might have a better life with more comfort." "How can you be so sure?" "Because anywhere is better than here." Her mother finally looked at her, and Abby saw unshed tears in her tired, hopeless eyes. "You don't understand now, but one day you'll understand that sometimes you have to choose between bad and worse, and your father has already chosen for you." And so Abby found herself on that noisy bus, climbing into the mountains with a bundle of old clothes and a completely shattered heart. Her father accompanied her in a heavy silence, carrying the Colonel's letter and treating his daughter as if she were just another piece of merchandise he used to deliver to distant customers. They didn't exchange a single word during the 3-hour journey. St. Benedict Ranch stretched for miles in every direction. Well-kept green pastures, superior breed cattle, an imposing main house built of natural stone and hardwood, with modern architecture that contrasted strikingly with the primitive rusticity of the region. There were also several smaller, strategically placed buildings, organized warehouses, clean stables, comfortable houses for employees. Everything was impeccably organized, visibly prosperous, breathing efficiency and genuine wealth. A man was waiting for them at the main wrought-iron gate, tall, dark-haired, about 40, with a naturally serious expression. He wore simple blue jeans, genuine leather boots, and a white cotton shirt, but there was something in his erect posture that conveyed an undeniable natural authority, the kind of presence that doesn't need a uniform or a symbol to be respected. "Are you the owner?" Anthony asked clumsily, getting out of the jeep that had brought them from the end of the paved road. "I am, Santiago Herrera." The voice was deep and resonant, with an accent Abby couldn't quite place, but which sounded cultured and educated. "I received a message about a letter to be delivered." Anthony handed over the sealed envelope with the Colonel's insignia and pushed Abby forward without any delicacy. "And I also brought my daughter. Colonel Josiah thought you might be in need of, well, female company." Santiago observed Abby with a silent, penetrating attention. She kept her eyes fixed on the gravel ground, deliberately forcing her left leg to seem stiffer and more problematic than it really was. She wore a simple, faded blue cotton dress, her clean brown hair tied back in a ponytail, and was visibly uncomfortable with the humiliating situation she was in. "And do you want to stay here?" Santiago asked her directly, completely ignoring her father. The question caught her completely by surprise. In 22 years of life, no one had ever asked her directly what she wanted, as if her opinion actually mattered. People always decided for her, about her, completely ignoring her feelings and desires. Slowly she raised her eyes and met his, dark, intense, intelligent, but without the cruelty or lust she had expected to find. There was something in that piercing gaze that she couldn't decipher, but that inexplicably made her feel safe. She hesitated, her voice coming out weaker than she would have liked. "Speak up, girl," her father ordered impatiently. "The man asked you a simple question." Abby looked at the father who had sold her, then at the prosperous ranch stretching before her, then back at Santiago, who was waiting for her. Answer with respectful patience. She knew that if she went back to Clearwater Creek, it would only be a matter of time before she was handed over to another man, probably worse than this stranger. At least here, maybe. "I want to stay," she murmured, surprising herself with her own courage. Santiago nodded once. "Then you can stay." He turned to Anthony with an icy coldness. "Tell Colonel Josiah that I have absolutely no interest in any partnership with him. And you can leave. Right now." The cutting chill in his voice was unmistakable and terrifying. Anthony swallowed hard, mumbled a few quick, disjointed recommendations to his daughter about being obedient and not causing unnecessary trouble, and left quickly without even a proper goodbye. Abby watched him descend the mountain in the dusty jeep and felt a heavy door close forever on her past life. "Come," Santiago said gently. "I'll show you where you'll be staying." She followed him in silence, limping exaggeratedly with each step, to one of the smaller houses near the main residence. Inside, it was simple but extremely comfortable. A large bedroom with a queen-sized bed, a full bathroom with hot water, a small living room, integrated with a well-equipped kitchen. The large windows overlooked the green pastures and the imposing mountains in the background, creating a sense of peace Abby had never experienced. "You can use everything as you wish," Santiago said. "There's fresh food in the fridge, full toiletries in the bathroom. If you need anything, just let me or the staff know." "And what?" She swallowed hard before continuing. "What exactly do you expect from me?" Santiago studied her again with those penetrating eyes, and Abby felt intensely that he could see much more than she wanted to reveal. "For now, absolutely nothing," he answered calmly. "Rest, explore the property if you like, get used to the place. We'll talk more tomorrow." He left the house, closing the door softly behind him, and for the first time in weeks, Abby was able to breathe deeply. She was alone, truly alone, with no one obsessively watching her every move, every facial expression, every word she spoke. Without a second thought, she walked normally to the large window to get a better look at the breathtaking landscape. Her steps were naturally firm, sure, balanced, without any trace of the limp she had perfectly faked her entire life. It was at that exact moment that she noticed a familiar shadow moving discreetly outside. Santiago was standing strategically near the side window of the house, from where he could see her perfectly through the clear glass, and he had witnessed everything with total attention. Their eyes met directly through the glass, and Abby felt the blood freeze in her veins. He had discovered the most important lie of her life in less than an hour. For the next 2 days, Santiago behaved as if nothing extraordinary had happened. He showed up punctually for meals, always polite, respectful, never invasive or threatening. He would cordially ask if she needed anything specific, if she was comfortable in the house, if the food was to her liking. Abby would answer in monosyllables, unable to truly relax. She knew with absolute certainty that he knew the whole truth about her. It was only a matter of time before the inevitable confrontation. During the day, while he worked intensely on managing the property, She cautiously explored the immediate surroundings of the house. When she was absolutely sure she was completely alone, she would walk normally, allowing herself a few precious moments of physical freedom. When she heard any suspicious noise of approach, she would quickly return to the perfect act she had mastered for 17 years. It was mentally and physically exhausting to maintain the constant charade, but she simply didn't know how to stop or what would happen if she did. On the morning of the third day, Santiago appeared in the kitchen earlier than usual. Abby was making coffee when she heard his firm steps approaching on the wooden porch. Instantly, she forced her left leg to stiffen and feigned great difficulty reaching for a cup on a slightly high shelf. "The act is up." His voice, perfectly calm but absolutely firm, made her freeze like a statue. She turned very slowly, still holding the white cup with visibly trembling hands. "What do you mean?" she managed to whisper. "You heard me. I saw you walking perfectly fine yesterday afternoon and the morning before. There is absolutely nothing wrong with your left leg." Abby felt both her legs give way at once. The cup slipped from her trembling hands and shattered violently on the ceramic floor, the sound echoing through the silent kitchen like a gunshot. She instinctively bent down to pick up the sharp pieces, but Santiago was much faster. "Leave it," he said gently, crouching to gather the shards with extreme care. "I'll get it." He stood up slowly and faced her with complete seriousness. "Now explain to me, why the whole charade?" She simply couldn't speak. 22 years of a carefully constructed lie unraveling in a matter of seconds. 22 years of desperate protection collapsing like a house of cards. If he decided to kick her out right now, where could she go? Who would take her in? "I'm not going to hurt you," Santiago said, noticing the absolute panic in her eyes. "And I'm definitely not sending you back to that place, but I need to understand the situation completely." The unexpected kindness in his voice was her emotional undoing. Abby completely fell apart. The tears came all at once, along with a jumble of words, desperate confessions she had kept locked away for decades. She told him in detail about the constant fear that ruled Clearwater Creek like an invisible dictatorship, about the girls who mysteriously disappeared, about the terrified parents who decided a broken daughter would finally be safe from predators, about endless years of public humiliation, of being treated like dead weight by her family and community, like something defective that needed to be permanently hidden from society, about the cruel sale to the colonel, about being literally traded for a miserable $8,000 debt. "I wasn't sent here out of fatherly love," she sobbed uncontrollably. "It was just to get rid of me for good. My father was always deeply ashamed of me. He said over and over that I was a punishment from God, that I'd never marry any man, that I'd die a virgin and completely useless. And I believed every single word. I honestly believed I was good for absolutely nothing in this world." Santiago listened to her in religious silence. When she finished, he approached very slowly and offered her a clean, scented handkerchief. "You're not the one who's broken," he said, his voice deliberately rough with genuine, contained anger. "The system that made you believe you had no human value is what's broken. The men who turned women into disposable commodities are broken. And the father who sold his own daughter like an animal is profoundly broken." She looked at him through the tears streaming down her face. In his dark eyes there was no trace of disgust, contempt, or cruelty. There was pure, genuine indignation, not directed at her, but in her defense, as if he were feeling every humiliation she had suffered in his own skin. "You are completely safe here," Santiago continued, his voice as firm as a sacred promise. "Colonel Josiah and men like him never come near my property, but I need you to stop this lie immediately. Here, in this place, you don't have to pretend to be less than you really are." "What if I can't?" The question came out as a desperate whisper. "I've lived this lie for so many years. My body is used to it. My mind has adapted. What if I don't know how to be normal anymore?" "Then I'll teach you," he answered without hesitation, "step by step, day by day, until you completely relearn who you really are." From that decisive moment on, Santiago became her private life coach. Every day, religiously, after finishing his work managing the ranch, he would dedicate 2 full hours to taking her for walks across the vast pastures. At first, Abby's steps were hesitant, completely unsure, like a child, learning to walk for the first time. Her body had become so accustomed to the charade that it was literally necessary to relearn the most basic physical truth. "Chin up," Santiago would guide with infinite patience. "You have no reason to hide from the world or from yourself. Distribute your weight evenly on both legs. They are what support you, not the cruel opinions of others. Stop for a moment. Breathe deeply. Feel the air enter and leave your lungs. You are naturally strong. You always have been, even when you didn't know it." They were seemingly simple, almost childish exercises, but for Abby, they represented a complete personal revolution. Each genuinely firm step was an epic little victory against decades of forced submission. Each moment walking upright was a silent rebellion against years of systematic humiliation. And Santiago proved to be an exceptionally patient teacher, always firm without ever being rude, constantly encouraging without ever being condescending or fake. Between one therapeutic walk and another, they talked for hours. Santiago told her he was born in Chile, the only son of a traditional family of prosperous businessmen who lost everything in a devastating economic crisis when he was just 20. He came to the United States as a young man, with no money, no contacts, no prospects. He initially worked as a ranch hand on other people's properties, saved every penny with iron discipline, studied agricultural management through correspondence courses, and invested intelligently in small plots of land. Little by little, he built a solid empire in agribusiness, but always kept a calculated distance from high society and local political games. "Why the voluntary seclusion?" Abby asked, genuinely curious. "Because power without character inevitably corrupts," he answered with absolute conviction, "and power wielded without ethical principles systematically destroys everything around it." It was a clear, indirect reference to men like Colonel Josiah. Abby began to gradually understand why Santiago had chosen to live isolated in the mountains. It wasn't misanthropy or arrogance, as the people of Clearwater Creek whispered. It was a conscious, moral decision to stay away from a social system he deeply despised. "And you never wanted to start a family of your own?" The question came out more intimate than she intended. Santiago hesitated for a long time before answering, and a shadow of old pain quickly passed through his eyes. "I tried once. It didn't end well." There was obviously a painful story behind that laconic answer, but Abby respected his silence and didn't press. Everyone carried their own scars, and she knew better than anyone how some wounds could remain sensitive for years. The weeks passed in an increasingly comfortable routine, and little by little Abby's self-confidence grew almost miraculously. She completely relearned how to walk normally, to look at herself in the mirror without automatic shame, to occupy physical space without mentally apologizing for her existence. She also began to voluntarily help with the general administration of the ranch, meticulously organizing paperwork, accurately controlling inventory, and updating financial spreadsheets. To her own surprise, she discovered she had a natural talent for numbers and strategic planning. And she also discovered, with growing intensity, that she was falling hopelessly in love with Santiago. It was simply impossible not to notice the quiet strength he radiated, the genuinely respectful way he treated all the ranch employees, the infinite patience he showed her daily. It was impossible to ignore his perfectly defined muscles when he worked shirtless under the intense afternoon heat, or the way his eyes perceptibly darkened when he met her in the kitchen each morning. The sexual tension between them grew exponentially with each passing day, a seemingly accidental touch when he corrected her posture during their daily walks, the gaze that lingered a few seconds too long when they thought the other wasn't looking, the unavoidable physical proximity when they worked side by side in the organized office, reviewing documents or planning equipment purchases. One particularly hot July night, after spending nearly 3 hours meticulously organizing financial documents side by side, the accumulated tension became absolutely unbearable. Abby got up to get a glass of cold water and genuinely stumbled, this time out of sheer emotional distraction, not as an act. Santiago caught her firmly by the waist, preventing a potentially dangerous fall, and for an eternal moment they stood there, completely pressed together, Their breathing visibly accelerated, eyes locked on each other with electric intensity. "Abby." His voice came out involuntarily hoarse, thick with restrained desire. "I know," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "I feel it too." He pulled away abruptly, as if the physical contact burned him. "This isn't right." "Why not?" "Because you're still completely rediscovering yourself, because you came here against your will, because I'm 10 years older than you, because I can choose," she interrupted him with surprising firmness, a new determination shining in her eyes. "For the first time in my entire life, I can choose freely, and I choose you, Santiago." He studied her intensely for long seconds that felt like hours. Then, very slowly, he raised his right hand and gently brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, the touch as soft as a breeze. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" "Completely." The first kiss was soft, almost questioning, as if he still feared he was taking moral advantage of her situation. But when Abby responded, with equal intensity, when her hands got lost in his dark hair, when a low, involuntary moan escaped her throat, Santiago completely lost the control he had been maintaining with such effort. The office desk was instantly forgotten. They moved towards the main ranch house, walking between urgent kisses and hands exploring long-desired territories, until they reached his large bedroom. There, Santiago deliberately became careful and respectful again. He removed each piece of her clothing very slowly, placing reverent kisses on every inch of gradually revealed skin, whispering words of adoration in Spanish that she didn't intellectually understand, but whose deep meaning she felt vibrate directly in her soul. When they finally came together completely, it was with a perfect blend of tenderness and passion. Abby cried, not from physical pain, but from a joy so overwhelming it transcended any previous experience. It was the first time she had truly made love, not just had mechanical sex. It was the first time she felt genuinely desired for who she really was, not for who she pretended to be or was supposed to be. Afterward, lying completely naked between the cotton sheets, Santiago held her protectively against his muscular chest and said, in an emotional voice, "I love you, Abby." "I love you too," she replied without hesitation. It was the purest, most crystalline truth either of them had spoken in many years, but the absolute happiness was tragically short-lived. In the early hours of the next morning, strange noises woke Santiago from a deep sleep. There were furtive footsteps on the wooden porch, male whispers, the unmistakable sound of something heavy being deliberately dragged across the floor. He got up silently and whispered for Abby to stay locked in the bedroom. He took a loaded shotgun from the closet and went out cautiously to investigate the source of the suspicious noises. Outside, in the darkness broken only by the waning moon, he found two unknown men prowling the property with clearly professional movements. They weren't common thieves or opportunistic intruders. They were well-dressed, visibly armed, clearly on a specific planned mission. Santiago silently circled them, using his intimate knowledge of the terrain, and had them at gunpoint before they even noticed his threatening presence. "Who exactly sent you here?" he asked, pointing the barrel of the shotgun directly at the chest of the one who seemed to be the leader. One of them, after some psychological persuasion, nervously confessed, "Colonel Josiah Kane. He said you were hiding property that rightfully belonged to him." Santiago understood the situation immediately. Josiah had somehow found out that Abby was fully recovered, no longer the useless cripple he thought he had handed over as debt payment, and now he desperately wanted her back, probably to sell her for a much higher price. "Is he coming himself?" "He should be on his way up the mountain with reinforcements now," the man admitted, trembling visibly. Santiago locked the two intruders in the tool shed and ran back to the house. He gently woke Abby and explained the grave situation with complete honesty. "We need to get out of here immediately. The colonel found out about you, and he's coming with armed men." She quickly packed a bag with essentials, while he gathered cash, important documents, and extra ammunition. The initial plan was to go down the mountain via the back service road and head straight for Charleston, where Santiago had reliable contacts who could help them disappear for a while. But when they finally left the main house, it was tragically too late. The bright headlights of several powerful cars rapidly ascending the main road were clearly visible in the total darkness of the early morning. And on the alternative back road, other lights were systematically approaching. They were completely surrounded. "Get back inside the house," Santiago ordered, checking the shotgun's ammunition. "Lock all the doors, hide in the storm cellar. I'll handle this." "Absolutely not," Abby declared with iron determination. "I'm not abandoning you now." "Abby, please, be rational." A makeshift Molotov cocktail suddenly flew towards them, hitting the side wall of the main house squarely. The fire spread quickly through the summer-dried wood, creating a wall of flames that cut off some of their escape routes. Santiago pulled Abby away from the growing blaze, but when they reached the central yard, they found they were completely surrounded by armed men. Colonel Josiah Kane emerged dramatically from the shadows, accompanied by 6 visibly dangerous men carrying automatic weapons. He was completely unrecognizable, his face red with uncontrolled rage, his small eyes bloodshot with pure hatred. He pointed a chrome-plated pistol directly at the center of Abby's chest. "Hand her over, you damn foreigner," he snarled in a guttural voice, "and maybe I'll consider letting you keep breathing." "Here's not anyone's property," Santiago replied calmly, positioning himself protectively in front of Abby. "The hell she ain't. I paid for her. $8,000 of forgiven debt. And now I find out that lying bastard of a father cheated me. The tramp ain't crippled at all. She's worth a hell of a lot more than that miserable $8,000. Josiah redirected his aim specifically at Abby's left leg, a cruel smile twisting his lips. Since she was always faking it before, now she's going to limp for real for the rest of her life. The fatal shot was never fired. Abby acted on pure, savage instinct. Years and years of carefully repressed anger exploded all at once like a volcano. She quickly grabbed the kerosene lamp that had fallen to the ground and hurled it with all her might at the colonel. The sudden explosion dramatically lit up the night and completely unbalanced his men, creating a few precious seconds of total confusion. Santiago instantly took advantage of the confusion to counterattack. He was not a naturally violent or aggressive man, but he had learned to defend himself efficiently on the dangerous streets of Santiago as a desperate young immigrant. And now he was literally fighting for the life of the woman he loved above all else. The fight was both brutal and surprisingly quick. Josiah, accustomed for decades to having his henchmen do all the dirty and dangerous work, simply didn't expect real organized resistance. When he found himself alone with all his men either knocked out or fleeing in panic, he desperately tried one last psychological ploy. He pointed his own gun directly at his own head. "If I can't have her, then nobody can," he screamed, completely unhinged. But Abby was no longer the scared, submissive girl who had arrived there months before. She ran straight at him, and in a perfectly athletic move she had learned from watching Santiago practice self-defense, disarmed him with a precise, well-aimed kick to his gun hand. The pistol flew far into the darkness. Josiah fell heavily to his knees in the dirt, finally and for the first time in decades, completely defenseless and vulnerable. "You're not even worth the price of the gunpowder," Santiago said, clearly out of breath but victorious. "But you're going to pay dearly for all the years of terror you've systematically spread throughout this entire region." They tied up Josiah Kane with thick work ropes and locked him in the same makeshift cell where his 2 original henchmen already were. The main ranch house continued to burn in ever higher flames, but neither Abby nor Santiago cared in the slightest about the destruction. It was as if their entire painful past was literally turning to ash along with the old building, making way for a completely new future. "So what now?" Abby asked, watching the flames slowly consume the old furniture. "Now we go down to the city and hand this scum over to the FBI," Santiago answered, with absolute determination. "I have reliable contacts in Charleston who will ensure he's properly investigated for human trafficking, corruption, extortion, and all the other heinous crimes he's committed over the years." "And after all that?" Santiago pulled her affectionately close and kissed her with desperate intensity, right there in the yard, with the fire crackling dramatically behind them like the backdrop of an epic movie. "After that, we build a new house right here, a whole new life, together, forever." The journey to Charleston took almost 6 hours, with the colonel and his henchmen tied up in the bed of the pickup truck, under constant armed guard. Santiago had called his contacts in the capital ahead of time, and when they arrived at the FBI field office, an operation was already being set up specifically to receive the prisoners. The lead special agent, Dr. Marcus Davis, was a man in his 50s with graying hair and a permanently serious expression, a specialist in human rights crimes. He had spent his entire career fighting exploitation and corruption networks in rural Appalachia and had known of Colonel Josiah's dark reputation for many years. "We've finally got our hands on this social cancer," the agent said, watching Josiah being led to a maximum security cell. "We've been trying to gather enough evidence against him for at least 10 years, but all the witnesses would mysteriously disappear or refuse to talk for fear of reprisals." "And now?" Santiago asked. "Now we have brave witnesses willing to testify," Dr. Davis replied, looking meaningfully at Abby. "And more importantly, we have him caught red-handed for attempted kidnapping and armed threat. That's enough to start a full investigation that will bring down the entire corrupt network in the region." Abby gave a detailed statement for nearly 4 consecutive hours. She told her entire story from childhood, explained the system of harvesting young women that operated in Clearwater Creek, named all the victims she knew, and described the scheme of forged debts the colonel used to blackmail entire families. It was a devastating account that left even the experienced agent visibly shaken. "How many other girls like you are there in this region?" Dr. Davis asked. "Dozens," Abby answered without hesitation. "Maybe hundreds. Some manage to escape to other cities. Others just disappear forever." In the following days, Operation Clean Mountain, as it was dubbed by the IFR press, unfolded into a massive investigation that shook 3 states. When the news of Colonel Josiah's arrest spread, dozens of previous victims began to emerge from the shadows, finally encouraged to report the abuse they had suffered. Women who had been forced into arranged marriages, entire families who lived under permanent blackmail, public officials coerced into participating in fraudulent schemes. The investigation revealed a network of corruption that extended far beyond Clearwater Creek. The town's mayor, 2 regional judges, the local sheriff, 3 councilmen, and at least 5 major businessmen were arrested in simultaneous raids. Bank accounts were frozen, properties were seized, and fraudulent public contracts were cancelled. Clearwater Creek had to be literally rebuilt from the ground up in political and social terms. Federal administrators temporarily took over the municipal government. New elections were called. Human rights organizations established permanent offices in the region to monitor the transition and protect potential victims. Anthony Miller, Abby's father, was found dead in his general store 3 weeks after the colonel's arrest. Officially, it was ruled a suicide by hanging. He left a rambling, poorly written letter, asking his daughter for forgiveness for the sins of a lifetime and declaring that he couldn't live with the weight of the shame. When Abby received the news from a court officer, her reaction surprised even herself. She didn't feel deep sadness, nor relief, nor renewed anger. She just felt a strange emptiness, as if a diseased part of her history had finally been amputated. "I can't feel sorry for him," she told Santiago honestly that night. "I feel sorry for the man he could have been if he had made different choices. But I can't genuinely mourn the death of the man who sold me like an animal." Santiago hugged her understandingly. He, too, had cut ties with family members who prioritized money and social status over human dignity. He knew exactly what it was like to sometimes have to choose between a toxic past and a healthy future. Antonia, Abby's mother, showed up at the rebuilt ranch a few weeks after the funeral. She was a woman completely transformed by the tragedy, thinner, more fragile, with completely white hair that hadn't been there months before. In her hands, she carried a small, old wooden chest. "These were the only good things your father kept of you," she explained in a trembling voice, opening the chest to reveal photographs of Abby's childhood, some drawings she had made in elementary school, a worn-out rag doll. "He never admitted it, but he kept all of this for years." Abby examined the objects with controlled emotion. They were fragments of a childhood she had almost forgotten, evidence that maybe at some distant point her father had actually loved her before fear and cowardice completely corrupted his heart. "Why did you never defend me?" Abby asked, the question that had tormented her for decades. "Because I was scared too," Antonia admitted, tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. Scared. Of him. Scared of the Colonel. Scared of everything. I spent my whole life so scared that I forgot how to be brave. And when I finally wanted to protect you, it was already too late." Abby offered forgiveness, but established clear and definitive boundaries. Her mother could visit occasionally, could be part of her future grandchildren's lives, but would never again have any influence over important decisions. The past could be forgiven, but it could not be completely forgotten. "You gave me life," Abby said. "For that I will always respect you as my mother. But the one who taught me how to truly live was the man who chose me when I was worth nothing to anyone." The new house at St. Benedict Ranch was built on the exact spot where the previous one had burned down, but Santiago and Abby decided it would be completely different from the original, smaller, cozier, with huge windows that allowed for maximum natural light, wide porches for contemplating the mountains, and a flower garden that Abby planted herself. It was a house designed for a happy family, not for a lonely bachelor. Abby quickly discovered she had an exceptional talent for agricultural management. Santiago patiently taught her about commodity markets, agricultural investments, strategic planning, and personnel management. She absorbed every piece of information with the voracious hunger of someone who had been prevented from learning for years, asking intelligent questions, suggesting creative improvements, and taking on increasing responsibilities. In less than a year, she was completely managing the ranch's financial operations. The employees genuinely respected her, not just because she was the boss's wife, but for her obvious competence and her respectful leadership style. She was firm when necessary, understanding when possible, and always fair in her decisions. The wedding was a simple and emotional ceremony, with only the ranch employees as witnesses. Abby wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, inspired by a design she saw in a magazine. Santiago wore a dark suit borrowed from a friend in Charleston. The ceremony took place at sunset in the garden she had planted, with the mountains serving as a majestic natural backdrop. The justice of the peace, specially brought from the capital to officiate the union, was the same Dr. Marcus Davis who had led the investigation against Colonel Josiah. He made a point of being present, declaring that he wanted to celebrate the victory of love over oppression. "I rarely see stories with an ending as beautiful as this one," he declared during the ceremony. "You two have proven that it's possible to rebuild your entire life when you have the courage to face the past and the faith to build the future." The reception was modest but joyful, with country music played by a local fiddler, homemade food prepared by the employees' wives, and dancing in the yard under the stars. Abby danced the night away without any trace of a limp, finally free to be who she had always been inside. During their impromptu honeymoon, a week at a romantic inn in Asheville, they planned their future in detail. Santiago wanted to expand the ranch's operations, perhaps invest in agritourism. Abby dreamed of creating a support center for women victims of domestic violence, offering job training and psychological support. "We want to help other people find their own liberation," Abby explained. "No one should have to go through what I went through. And if we could overcome it, other people can too." 6 months after the wedding, definitive news arrived about Colonel Josiah's trial. He was sentenced to 23 years in prison for multiple crimes: human trafficking, active and passive corruption, racketeering, extortion, making threats, attempted kidnapping, and assault. The sentence was considered exemplary by the national press, setting an important precedent for similar cases. "Justice is finally served," Santiago declared when they heard about the conviction. "No," Abby wisely corrected. "Justice would be if none of this had ever happened in the first place. But at least now other girls are protected, and that's worth a lot." On their first wedding anniversary, Abby discovered she was pregnant with twins. "A boy and a girl," the doctor confirmed during a routine ultrasound, pointing to the 2 tiny figures on the grainy screen. Santiago cried openly at the doctor's office. Abby did too. not from sadness or fear, but from a joy so pure and intense it transcended any previous experience. After lifetimes marked by rejection and loneliness, they were going to create 2 new lives based on unconditional love. "What are we going to name them?" Santiago asked, still emotional. "Esperanza," Abby said, looking lovingly at the image of the girl on the monitor. "It means hope in Spanish, so she never forgets that there is always hope, even in the darkest moments." "And the boy?" "Benjamin," she decided quickly. "In honor of my real name, but also because it means son of the right hand, blessed. And he truly will be blessed. He'll grow up knowing he is loved and wanted." "Esperanza and Benjamin Herrera Miller," Santiago murmured, testing how the full name sounded. "Our children will have the best of both of us, your strength and my determination." The twins were born on a sunny December morning, 2 weeks ahead of schedule. Esperanza came first, crying vigorously, with dark eyes identical to her father's and an expression that already conveyed determination. Benjamin arrived 12 minutes later, calmer, with his mother's serene smile and an evident curiosity in his eyes. The birth took place at the ranch, with the assistance of an experienced midwife and a trusted doctor. Abby had insisted on giving birth at home, in the place where she had been reborn into a true life. She wanted her children to begin their lives exactly where hers had truly begun. Santiago watched the births with indescribable emotion. It was the first time he had seen life being created, and he deeply understood why people speak of miracles. He held each baby as soon as they were born, whispering promises in Spanish about protection, love, and freedom. "Never," Abby said a few hours later, nursing both babies simultaneously, "never will I allow anyone to make our children believe they are worth less than they truly are." "Never," Santiago confirmed, kissing her sweaty forehead. "And if anyone tries, we'll both be here to stop them with all our strength." Raising the twins in the tranquility of the ranch, far from urban violence and corruption, Abby and Santiago built something neither of them had known in their own childhoods, a family, genuinely, based on love, mutual respect, and absolute truth. The children grew up knowing they were deeply wanted, unconditionally valued, and completely free to be who they really were. Esperanza proved to be a brave and inquisitive girl, always defending other animals and smaller children. At 5, she was already declaring she wanted to be a lawyer to defend weak people. Benjamin was more contemplative, passionate about plants and animals, dreaming of becoming a veterinarian to take care of all the hurt animals in the world. "They're going to change the world for the better," Abby would say with absolute conviction, watching her children play in the flower garden. "Just like we changed our little piece of it," Santiago would reply, hugging her from behind. And they were right. St. Benedict Ranch had become a symbol of renewal and hope throughout the region. Entire families came to visit, seeking inspiration for their own battles against oppression. Abby personally met with many women, offering practical advice and emotional support. "Freedom isn't given," she would teach the visitors. "It's earned day by day, choice by choice. And it's worth every tear, every fight, every moment of fear. Because on the other side is a life that's truly worth living." Years passed like pages in a well-written book, each chapter bringing new discoveries and achievements. St. Benedict Ranch transformed not only into a prosperous rural property, but into a true symbol of renewal for the entire Appalachian region. What began as a refuge for 2 wounded hearts had become a beacon of hope for hundreds of people. Abby, now 28, had developed into a woman of striking presence and natural leadership. She managed not only the ranch's financial operations, but also coordinated a social project that grew exponentially each year. The Esperanza Institute, named in honor of her daughter, offered free vocational training for women victims of domestic violence, literacy courses for adults, and psychological support for vulnerable families. The project had started modestly, with just Abby meeting a few neighbors on her porch, sharing her experience and offering words of encouragement, but it quickly grew to unimaginable dimensions. Business leaders from Charleston began making donations. The state government allocated specific funds. Universities sent interns from their psychology and social work programs. In 5 years, the institute had already served over 200 families. I never imagined my personal story could help so many people, Abby said in an interview for a national television program documenting transformative social projects. But I discovered that when we share our scars, they can become bridges for other people to cross their own chasms. Santiago, for his part, had significantly expanded the ranch's business. In addition to traditional cattle ranching, he had developed an innovative sustainable agritourism project that attracted visitors from all over the country. Guests came not only to enjoy the stunning mountain scenery, but primarily to learn about the real story of social transformation that the property represented. "We sell more than just a place to stay," Santiago explained to journalists. "We sell the experience of seeing in practice how love can truly change the world. Our guests leave here with a stronger belief in the human capacity for resilience." The twins, Esperanza and Benjamin, grew up in this unique environment, surrounded by real stories of overcoming adversity and living examples that it was possible to completely rebuild one's life with courage and determination. By age 10, both already showed remarkable personalities and a developed social conscience. Esperanza had become an eloquent and brave girl, always defending just causes at school and organizing fundraising campaigns for families in need. She had inherited her mother's determination and her father's strategic intelligence. Her teachers said she had the soul of a leader and a natural ability to mobilize people around common goals. "When I grow up, I'm going to be a lawyer specializing in women's rights," she had announced at age 8 during a school presentation on careers, "because there are still many mothers and daughters who need someone to defend them against bad men." Benjamin, though more introspective than his sister, possessed an extraordinary sensitivity to environmental issues and animal welfare. He spent hours studying medicinal plants with his grandmother Antonia, who had moved into a small house built especially for her at the back of the property. He dreamed of becoming a veterinarian, but not just to treat domestic animals. He wanted to specialize in the conservation of native Appalachian species. "Dad always says we have to take care of the land that gave us everything," Benjamin would explain to visitors at the institute, guiding them through the native plant nursery he had created himself. "So I want to learn how to take care of all the animals and plants that are part of our mountains." Antonia, the twins' maternal grandmother, had completely transformed in recent years. The fragile, submissive woman who had arrived at the ranch asking for forgiveness had found, in her relationship with her grandchildren, a new reason to live. She dedicated herself entirely to teaching them traditional recipes, family stories, and especially the values of honesty and courage that she herself had failed to practice in her youth. "Your grandchildren gave me a second chance to be the grandmother I couldn't be as a mother," she confessed to Abby in an intimate conversation. "They taught me that it's never too late to do the right thing." The relationship between Abby and her mother had evolved into a respectful and affectionate coexistence, but always with well-defined boundaries. Antonia actively participated in her grandchildren's education, helped with the Institute's projects, and maintained a small medicinal herb garden that had become a tourist attraction. But she never tried to influence important decisions, fully respecting her daughter's autonomy. The social transformations in the region had been even more impressive than the family's personal changes. Clearwater Creek, once dominated by fear and corruption, had become a national model of democratic participation and sustainable social development. The new political leaders, elected in transparent processes monitored by civil society organizations, prioritized education, health, and human rights. Abby's father's old general store had been transformed into a community library, offering free computer classes and college prep courses. The building that once housed the corrupt sheriff's department now hosted a specialized domestic violence support center, staffed by trained and sensitized professionals. Dr. Marcus Davis, the FBI agent who had led Operation Clean Mountain, had been promoted and transferred to Washington, D.C., where he coordinated a national program to combat human trafficking. But he kept in regular contact with Abby and Santiago, considering them living examples of how justice can be transformative when exercised with humanity. "You proved that it's possible to break cycles of violence that seemed eternal," he said during an official visit to the institute. "Your story has become a case study in police academies and law schools across the country." Colonel Josiah Kane continued to serve his 23-year sentence in a maximum security federal penitentiary. At 70, he was visibly deteriorated both physically and mentally. He had completely lost the prestige and power he had wielded for decades. His former allies had completely abandoned him, and even in prison, he was isolated by other inmates who despised sex offenders. Abby had never visited the former colonel in prison, nor did she intend to. "He is no longer a part of my life," she would explain when asked about it. "My energy is dedicated exclusively to the present and the future, not to a past that has been definitively buried." On their 10th wedding anniversary, Santiago and Abby renewed their vows in an emotional ceremony that brought together more than 300 people in the main yard of the ranch. Present were beneficiaries of the institute, property employees, local authorities, and national and international journalists interested in the story of social transformation the family represented. Abby wore the same white dress from her original wedding, carefully preserved and slightly altered. Santiago kept his simple suit, but added a silk handkerchief that Esperanza had embroidered especially for the occasion. The twins served as ring bearers, carrying renewal rings made by a local jeweler with ethically sourced gold from the region itself. 10 years ago, I was a broken woman who didn't believe I deserved love," Abby declared during the ceremony, her voice firm and emotional. "Today, I am a happy wife, a proud mother, a successful businesswoman, and a social activist. This transformation was only possible because I found a man who saw my worth when I couldn't see it myself." Santiago, in turn, spoke about how love had also changed his perspective on life. "I lived in isolation, protecting myself from the world and from people. Abby taught me that true strength comes not from isolation, but from the ability to connect with other human beings and build something bigger than ourselves." The party lasted all night, with live music, regional food prepared by the women served by the institute, and emotional testimonials from people whose lives had been transformed by the couple's social work. It was a celebration not only of their marriage, but of a decade of collective achievements that had changed an entire region. During their renewal honeymoon, a 2-week trip to Chile for Santiago to show his origins to Abby and the children, they visited his hometown and met the few relatives who had remained in the country. It was an emotional journey of reconnecting with his roots, but also of confirming that the United States had definitively become his true home. "This is where I was born," Santiago said, showing them the modest house where he had spent his childhood. "But it was in America where I truly began to live." Esperanza and Benjamin were fascinated by Chilean culture, learned a few words in Spanish, tried typical dishes, and met distant cousins. But they also clearly showed that they felt 100% American, speaking English with a distinct Appalachian accent and missing their grandmother, Antonia's home cooking. "We're Americans with Chilean hearts," Esperanza declared philosophically, demonstrating an impressive emotional maturity at 10 years old. Back in the States, the family resumed their routine of work and studies with renewed energy. The institute had grown so much that it needed new facilities. With support from Charleston businessmen and government grants, they built a modern complex with classrooms, a computer lab, a library, a daycare for the students' children, and even a small theater where plays about human rights were performed. Abby officially took over as president of the organization, leaving the daily management of the ranch entirely to Santiago. It was a natural division of labor that respected each of their specific talents. He focused on the rural and tourism businesses, while she specialized in the social and educational impact. "We discovered that our talents complement each other perfectly," Santiago explained in interviews. "I generate the financial resources, and she transforms them into concrete social change. It's a partnership that works in both our marriage and our business." National recognition came when Abby was nominated for Inspire magazine's Woman of the Year award in the social causes category. Although she didn't win first place, the nomination brought national visibility to the Institute's work and opened doors for partnerships with major corporations and international organizations. The award itself isn't the most important thing, Abby said at the awards ceremony in New York. What's important is that stories like mine inspire other women to believe that it's possible to completely rebuild their lives, no matter how difficult the past has been. Around the same time, Santiago received an unexpected proposal. A group of international investors was interested in acquiring St. Benedict Ranch for an astronomical sum, over $20 million. It was an offer that would make them millionaires and allow them to live anywhere in the world. The couple talked at length about the proposal, weighing the pros and cons, even consulting their children for their opinion. But the final decision was unanimous and swift. They would stay exactly where they were. Money can buy comfort, but it can't buy a life's purpose, Santiago explained to the investors. Our family found not just a home here, but a mission, and that mission is worth more than any amount of money. Esperanza and Benjamin fully supported their parents' decision. This is our real home, Esperanza said. This is where Mom was reborn and where we were born. No amount of money can buy that. Benjamin, always more connected to nature, added, and if we leave, who will take care of our animals and our plants? They need us here. The decision to remain on the ranch was seen by many as definitive proof that the family had found not only financial stability, but more importantly, existential fulfillment. They were not wealthy people seeking more wealth, but human beings who had discovered the true meaning of success, the ability to transform personal suffering into collective benefit. On her 30th birthday, during the 12th year of her marriage, Abby reflected deeply on the journey she had taken. If someone had told me 15 years ago that I would be a respected businesswoman, a mother of adorable twins, the wife of a wonderful man, and the leader of a national social project, I would have thought they were crazy, she said in an interview for a women's magazine. But I learned that life can change completely when you find the courage to break the chains that bind you to the past. Santiago, at 42, had established himself as one of the most respected rural entrepreneurs in West Virginia. But what made him proudest were not the productivity awards or the ranch's growing profits. It was knowing that he had actively participated in the transformation of an entire region, that his work had created decent jobs for dozens of families, and that his property had become a symbol of sustainable development. True success isn't measured just by what you accumulate, he would philosophize during lectures at agricultural universities. It's measured mainly by what you build for the next generations. And the next generations, represented by the twins Esperanza and Benjamin, were growing up demonstrating that they had inherited the best of both their parents, their mother's social sensitivity, their father's strategic vision, and above all, a deep understanding that privilege comes with responsibility. 15 years had passed since that June morning when Abby had climbed the mountain as a broken and frightened young woman. Now, at 37, she had established herself as one of the most influential social leaders in the state. The Esperanza Institute had expanded its operations to 12 counties in the region, annually serving over 1,500 women and their families. Abby's physical transformation over the years was remarkable. The stooped, insecure posture had given way to a natural elegance and radiant confidence. Her brown hair, now cut in a modern professional style, framed a face that retained its natural beauty but had gained expression lines that told stories of genuine laughter and hard-won victories. She dressed with sophisticated simplicity, always choosing clothes that conveyed seriousness without losing her femininity. Santiago, at 49, had matured magnificently. The first grey hairs at his temples and a few wrinkles around his dark eyes only enhanced his striking presence. He remained physically active, maintaining his athletic build through daily work on the ranch and regular hikes in the mountains he loved so much. He was nationally respected as an example of a socially responsible entrepreneur, frequently invited to speak at universities and international conferences on sustainable development. The twins, Esperanza and Benjamin, now 17-year-old teenagers, had grown up in a unique atmosphere of unconditional love and keen social awareness. Both demonstrated impressive emotional maturity and clarity about their life purposes. Esperanza had become an eloquent and charismatic young woman, president of the student council at one of Charleston's top private high schools, where she studied on a full scholarship due to her exceptional academic performance. She retained the physical traits she inherited from her father, penetrating dark eyes and above-average height, but her personality clearly reflected her mother's determined strength. "I want to study law at UVA," she had announced the previous year during a family conversation about future plans. "But not just any law. I want to specialize in human rights and start my own social justice law firm. I plan to provide free legal defense for vulnerable women, like Mom was one day." Benjamin, for his part, had developed a deep connection with nature that impressed even the environmental experts who visited the ranch. He had turned his childhood passion for plants and animals into a serious scientific vocation. At 17, he was already publishing articles in specialized journals on Appalachian conservation and corresponding with researchers at international universities. "I'm going to study biology at WVU," he had declared with conviction. "I want to get my master's and PhD in ecosystem conservation. My goal is to create a research center here in our region, focused on preserving native species and developing sustainable technologies for rural properties." Antonia, at 72, had become the loving grandmother she had never managed to be as a protective mother. She spent her days teaching traditional recipes to the women at the Institute, tending to the medicinal garden that had become a regional landmark, and above all, being an inexhaustible source of affection and wisdom for her teenage grandchildren. "Your children gave me a third chance at life," she often told Abby. "The first was when I was born, the second was when you forgave me, and the third was when they arrived and taught me that true love knows no age." The relationship between Abby and her mother had evolved into a genuine friendship, based on mutual respect and understanding. Antonia never tried to fully justify her past omissions, but she had dedicated the last 15 years to demonstrating through concrete actions that she had learned from her mistakes. She actively participated in the social projects, volunteered her time, and most importantly, fully respected her daughter's decisions. The Esperanza Institute had become a national model for integrated social assistance. In addition to traditional vocational courses, it now offered a comprehensive microcredit program for small entrepreneurs, a daycare for participants' children, specialized psychological counseling, free legal advice, and even a literacy program for the elderly. "We discovered that it's not enough to teach a profession," Abby explained during interviews. "You have to care for the whole person, their mental health, their family situation, their dreams and fears. Only then can we achieve truly lasting transformations." The project had attracted international attention. Delegations from Latin American countries regularly came to learn about the methodology developed at the ranch. European universities sent exchange students. United Nations organizations included the Institute in reports on best practices for social development. Santiago continued to manage the ranch with impressive efficiency, but now his main focus was to demonstrate that it was possible to combine profitability with environmental and social responsibility. The property had become an open-air laboratory for sustainable techniques, solar energy, biological wastewater treatment, intelligent crop rotation, sustainable pasture management. "We've proven that doing good can also be profitable," he would say at business conferences. "Our ranch is more productive today than it was 15 years ago. It generates more jobs, it better preserves the environment, and it still contributes to the social transformation of the region. It is indeed possible to reconcile all these objectives." The couple had received numerous awards and recognitions over the years. Abby was honored as an honorary citizen of Clearwater Creek, received an honorary doctorate from West Virginia University, and was nominated twice for the National Human Rights Award. Santiago had received the Sustainable Entrepreneur of the Year Award, was decorated by the state of West Virginia, and had his name on 2 rural schools in the region. But what made them proudest were not the awards or public recognition. It was seeing concretely the lives they had helped transform. Hundreds of women who had gone through the Institute had managed to rebuild their lives, some becoming successful small business owners, others returning to school and graduating from universities. Many sent Christmas cards, photos of their graduated children, and wedding invitations. Each success story from our students is worth more than any award, Abby would say emotionally, because every woman who manages to break free inspires other women to believe that it's possible too. During a special interview for a documentary on social transformation in America, Abby and Santiago reflected together on their 15 years of marriage and social work. The conversation took place in the exact spot where Santiago had discovered she didn't limp, the kitchen of the first house, which now served as a museum of the family's and the Institute's history. If someone had told me 20 years ago that I would be a respected businesswoman and a nationally recognized social leader, I wouldn't have believed it, Abby said, looking out the window at the modern complex of the Institute. But more importantly, if someone had told me I would be a happy mother and a fulfilled wife, married for true love, that would have seemed impossible. And I, Santiago added, if someone had told me I would leave my solitary life to get married, have children, and dedicate my life to social projects, I would have laughed at them. I thought I was well protected in my chosen solitude. What changed everything was the decision to believe in each other, Abby continued. You believed I was worth more than I thought I was. I believed you were different from the other men I had known, and from that mutual trust, not only our love was born, but all the transformation we created together. Esperanza and Benjamin also participated in the interview, demonstrating impressive maturity for teenagers. Esperanza spoke about how growing up knowing her parents' story had influenced her worldview. I grew up knowing that Mom was very brave to get out of a terrible situation and build a new life. That taught me that it's always possible to change our reality when we have determination and find the right people to support us, Benjamin added. And Dad taught me that real men protect and respect women. They don't control or dominate them. Seeing how he treats Mom showed me what kind of man I want to be when I grow up. The interview concluded with a family walk through the ranch's pastures, on the same path Santiago and Abby used to take 15 years ago when she was relearning to walk normally. Now, the four of them walked together, talking naturally about future plans, environmental concerns, and the Institute's projects. You know what impresses me most about this whole story? Santiago said, stopping on a hill from which the entire property could be seen. It's that it wasn't just Abby who was transformed. I was completely transformed too. The region was transformed. Hundreds of families were transformed. True love has that multiplying power. It's true, Abby agreed. When two people find each other and decide to build something bigger than themselves, the results can be far beyond what they initially imagined. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Abby and Santiago took their traditional evening walk. It was a habit they had kept religiously for 15 years, regardless of the weather or their schedule. These were the couple's most intimate moments, when they talked about worries, dreams, plans, or simply enjoyed each other's silent company. Any regrets after all these years? Santiago asked, repeating a question they had asked each other annually since their first wedding anniversary. None, Abby answered without hesitation. Maybe I regret not discovering my own worth sooner in life. But I don't regret the path I took, because it brought me exactly where I needed to be. To you, to our children, to this life we've built together. And you? She returned the question. My only regret is not having bought this ranch 10 years earlier, Santiago said, smiling. We would have met sooner and had more time together. Abby laughed, the same crystal-clear laugh that had won Santiago over years before. Do you really think I was ready for this relationship 10 years earlier? Maybe not, he admitted, but I would have been here waiting for you to be ready. They stopped at the top of their favorite hill, from where they could see the entire illuminated property. The main house with its cozy windows, the modern complex of the Institute with a few lights still on, the organized stables, the well-maintained fences, the cattle resting peacefully in the pastures. You know what I love most about our story, Abby said, holding on to her husband. What? That it wasn't an impossible fairy tale. It was a daily construction, a conscious choice, a joint effort. It wasn't love at first sight or romantic destiny. It was two wounded people who decided to heal together and use their scars to help others. Santiago kissed her tenderly right there, under the Appalachian stars, as he always did when he was too moved. to express his feelings in words. "And what I love most," he said, "is knowing that our story doesn't end here. Our children will write their own chapters. The women who go through the Institute will create their own transformations. What started here will continue to multiply for generations." As they walked down the hill hand in hand, Abby reflected on the extraordinary journey she had lived. 20 years earlier, she was a young woman who pretended to limp to protect herself from a cruel world. Now she was a woman who walked with her head held high, the master of her own life, a proud mother, a fulfilled wife, a respected leader. "Life can change completely," she murmured to herself, "when you find the courage to stop pretending to be smaller than you really are." Santiago heard and agreed. "And when you find someone who sees your true worth, even when you can't see it yourself." Arriving home, they found Esperanza still awake, studying at the kitchen table. At 17, she already showed the same determination as her mother and the same strategic intelligence as her father. "Studying for the SATs?" Abby asked. "No, Mom, I'm writing my senior thesis proposal. I chose the topic Social Transformation Through Personal Narratives, a case study of the Esperanza Institute." Abby and Santiago looked at each other, moved. Their daughter had chosen to academically study the family's work, showing that she truly understood and valued the legacy she had received. "Can I ask you guys some questions tomorrow?" Esperanza continued. "I want to include testimonials about how you managed to turn personal trauma into social strength." "Of course, honey," Abby replied, "but you already know the whole story." "I know the version you tell the family," Esperanza said with precocious wisdom, "but I want to understand the academic version, with sociological and psychological analyses. I want to understand scientifically how two people managed to change an entire region." That night, lying in the bed they had shared for 15 years, Abby and Santiago talked about the near future. The children would soon be leaving for college. The institute was established and running autonomously. The ranch was prosperous and sustainable. "What's our next project?" Abby asked. "How about we start thinking about becoming grandparents?" Santiago suggested playfully. "It's still too early for that," Abby laughed. "But how about we expand the institute to other states? We've already received invitations from California and Florida. Or we could simply enjoy the life we've built," Santiago suggested. "Travel more, visit social projects in other countries, write a book about our experience." "Those are all great options," Abby agreed. "The important thing is that we'll decide together, as we always have." And there, embraced in the cozy darkness of their room, they both knew with absolute certainty that they had overcome every imaginable challenge. They had overcome fear, oppression, emotional poverty, the inner voices that said they didn't deserve happiness. They had won through genuine love, honest work, mutual dedication, and above all, the daily decision to choose hope over despair. Some romances are born from overwhelming passions that burn intensely and fade quickly. Others, like Abby and Santiago's, are born from the courage of two people who refused to accept less than they deserved, who chose daily to build something bigger than their own individual needs. In the end, that was what truly changed everything. Not just romantic love, but the conscious decision to honor it, protect it, make it grow, and above all use it as a transformative force to benefit others. And as the Appalachian Mountains slept under the starry sky, Abby and Santiago knew they had written a story that transcended their own lives. A story that proved, in a concrete and inspiring way, that it is possible to rewrite destinies when you have true love as your foundation. Abby no longer limped. She no longer pretended to be smaller. She walked firmly, with her head held high, the master of herself, of her own destiny, and above all, of the infinite capacity to transform suffering into strength, fear into courage, and love into a quiet revolution. Exactly as it always should have been.